So there's a new report out by the Brennan Center that's showing how states are increasing the purges of voter rolls going into the 2018 midterms and into the 2020 election. Now, here's some context before we get into the details. So back in 1993, Congress passed the National Voter Registration Act, which was an attempt to make registering to vote easier by offering licensed applicants the opportunity to register to vote. Now, the law also prevented states from purging voters unless they met certain requirements, meaning you can't just go and purge people off the rolls for no good reason. You actually have to have a good reason. Okay. Now, unfortunately, the Brennan report highlights how states have decided to skirt that law and have actually purged voters without any sort of punishment for doing so. Now, that, of course, happened after the court dismantled the requirements for pre-clearance with the Shelby v. Holder ruling. So that, of course, is a direct strike against the Voting Rights Act. So that basically said that states with histories of voter discrimination no longer required federal pre-clearance before purging their voter rolls. So they can purge it for any reason that they want. Now, the impact, of course, has been disastrous. Between 2014 and 2016, 16 million registered voters were removed from the state rolls. That's 33% more than were moved between 2006 and 2008. Now, for the elections of 2012 and 2016, the Brennan Center estimates that 2 million fewer voters would have been purged if those states had to apply by the provisions of the Voting Rights Act. And that is, of course, Section 5. Now, I'm not saying all voter purges are a terrible thing. This actually happens fairly often. But see, there are actual good reasons to purge voters from the rolls. For example, people who die. Well, you don't want dead people on the rolls, right? Conservatives always complain about that. Oh, it's dead people voting. Yeah, they get removed from the polls. That they're supposed to be. They're not supposed to be on the voter rolls. Not only that, but you have people who moved or are no longer in that district. They get purged from the rolls. That's fine. All that's fine. However, this is different and actually far more insidious. Now, here's some examples from the report. In June of 2016, the Arkansas Secretary of State had given a list of 7,700 names to county clerks to be removed from the rolls. Why? Well, felony convictions, right? Well, we can't let felons vote. I actually think we should restore voting rights to felons who have served their time, depending on the crime. Now, the problem with this is that this list included people who had actually never been convicted of a felony and formerly convicted persons whose voting rights had actually been restored. So that, look, not even having a felony, much less, of course, serving your time and actually having your voting rights restored, not being able to vote because of those things, disastrous. Okay, there's more. In 2013, Virginia deleted 39,000 names from its voting roster, which, again, is a very large amount of people. In some counties, the mistakes on the list of those people were as high as 17%. So a lot of the people who were purged from the voter rolls didn't even know it. And they were done by mistake. And that's the other thing, right? So you have a system right now that can purge you from the voter rolls and then not actually tell you. So if you actually are interested in voting, you go up and you try to vote and you find out, oh, you're not eligible because you're not registered. You're purged from the voter rolls. Well, when did that happen? Nobody told me about it. Well, turns out they don't have to. That is definitely something that needs to change. Now, there's more. Another example. Federal court had actually halted a purge after Hurricane Katrina after justices found that 1/3 of the purged names came from a majority black parish of New Orleans. So this, of course, goes to the notion that most of the people that are being purged from the rolls, they're not affluent white voters in the suburbs. Okay, see, these are urban voters. These are people who are minorities. And so on and on it goes. On and on it goes. Now, Alabama, Indiana, and Maine have also instituted the cross-check system, cross-check interstate, which, of course, purges voters without federally mandated notifications, and also does so based on basically your name. If you have a similar name to somebody somewhere else, well, they can purge you from the rolls. And normally, it always happens to target African American and Latino voters. Now, it's not an accident. They go after those communities on purpose. Now, some of the reasons that they're able to be caught up in these voter purges is, for one, black and Hispanic voters seem more likely to move, often in the same jurisdiction, but voter purges based on address happen to eliminate them from voting. Officials also use something called voter caging, which intentionally sends mail to verify addresses in a format that cannot be forwarded, leading to the disenfranchisement of possibly hundreds of thousands of eligible voters. And of course, there's the other thing. Thanks to our high incarceration rate of people of color, African Americans are more likely to have felony convictions. Not only that, but elderly and minority voters are also more likely to be incapacitated, which is another reason for them to get purged from the voter rolls. Add that to the many other ways that votes are depressed, and you see a bit of a pattern, but more importantly, you see a motive. Who's the people passing these things? Who are the people that are actually looking to do voter purges? It usually happens to be Republicans. Now, of course, you could point to 2016 during the primary and also look at what happened in New York, in Brooklyn. There were some voter purges. There's a lot of voters that were purged that could not vote in that presidential primary. And I heard a lot about that. So it's not that Democrats don't do it. They do. But it happens that the majority of people that are trying to do this are Republicans. So, look, the main reason that they try to do this, too, is they don't want black people to vote. Now, they'll lie and actually say, no, it's about protecting our elections. In fact, we've got so much voter fraud, in-person voter fraud, right? No, actually, that's numerous studies have shown that voter fraud, in-person voter fraud, is virtually non-existent. And when it actually does happen, most likely it's somebody who's a Republican or somebody who just does it by mistake. And that happens as well. So, look, the reason that they do it is when there are high turnout, they tend to lose. Just go back to Paul Weyrich, where he said, look, when more people vote, we tend to lose more. So we don't want people voting. We want less people voting and more of our people voting. He is the father of the modern conservative movement. And his teachings continue to be espoused today. And his entire, policy of making sure that less people vote in elections continues to be espoused by the Republican Party. So there's that. Well, what we should do is we should be doing the opposite. And that's why we should really shine a light and focus on this problem. We need to make voting more accessible. Now, I'm not saying online voting. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, that's a great idea. I actually think that's not a great idea because of insecurities in the system and accountability. I actually do believe we should go back to hand-counted paper ballots. That is actually accountable. It's hack-proof. You can't really fudge the results, at least not, I guess, as easily as you could change ballot totals on a machine that you hack into. So that's one thing that I think that we should do. We should also have a voter holiday, a paid voter holiday, which I think would be excellent. And, of course, working on trying to end these unfair voter purges. Now, again, there is a reason to purge voters. But we have to make sure that the people who do so, who are in charge of that, have proper oversight and don't do so to give one party an advantage over the other. And so for it to do some of those things and actually really have good accountable elections, that's what we need to do. And unfortunately, the Republican Party is not doing that. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.